Today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of how the world's largest democracy was born. And let me tell you, this wasn't just a single event. It was a 60-year struggle, a long, hard journey of defiance, sacrifice, and, in the end, triumph. So, before we jump into the timeline, let's just start with this one big question that really hangs over this whole story. How is a nation's freedom actually won? I mean, is it through polite debate? Is it through protest? Or is it something else entirely? This is the question that drove every single decision for decades. And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, look at this timeline. The very first organized steps started way back in 1885. But independence? That didn't come until 1947. That's 62 years. We're talking about a multi-generational effort where the fight for freedom was literally passed down from parents to their children. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. We'll call this part Seeds of Rebellion. These are those early years, where all that scattered frustration started to get organized. This is where the ideas that would eventually grow into a massive nationwide movement were first planted. The first huge date you need to know is 1885. This is when the Indian National Congress, or the INC, was formed. And this was a game changer because, for the first time, educated Indians had a big, unified platform to actually voice their issues to the British. Now, this first period is often called the moderate phase. Their whole strategy was based on dialogue and petitions, not really mass protests. At least not. But, well, the tone changed pretty quickly. By the early 1900s, you can see the tactics evolving. The Swadeshi movement, for example, was basically an economic attack, boycotting British goods to hit them where it hurt. Then, the Vande Mataram movement organized huge protests against the British plan to divide Bengal. And by 1915, the Home Rule movement made the demand crystal clear. We want self-government. Each step was like a new experiment, building up political awareness across the whole country. And then came a massive turning point. In 1919, right after World War I, a war where, by the way, tons of Indians had fought for the British Empire, the government introduced something called the Rowlatt Act. This law was just draconian. It left the government imprison anyone they suspected of stirring up trouble, with no trial. It was a total slap in the face to everyone who thought their loyalty would be rewarded with more freedom, and it sparked outrage everywhere. That outrage led directly to one of the most tragic events in India's history. In the city of Amritsar, a huge group of unarmed Indians, men, women, and children, gathered for a peaceful protest against the Rowlatt Act. They were in a walled garden called Jallianwala Bagh. British troops came, blocked the only way out, and just opened fire on the crowd. Hundreds were killed. This single brutal act horrified the entire nation. It's really the moment the movement transformed from a political debate into an all-out mass struggle for freedom. And that brings us to our second act, a nation mobilized. After Jallianwala Bagh, the gloves were off. The era was polite petitions was completely over. The movement just exploded from the meeting rooms of the elite and poured into the streets and villages, pulling in millions and millions of ordinary people. The immediate response was the non-cooperation movement. And this was a totally radical new strategy. The idea was actually pretty simple, but incredibly powerful. What if Indians just refused to cooperate? If lawyers, teachers, students, and officials all just withdrew from the British system, the whole thing would just collapse. It was the first truly nationwide campaign of nonviolent civil disobedience. But maintaining perfect nonviolence is incredibly difficult. In 1922, at a place called Chauri Chora, a protest turned violent. A police station was set on fire and several officers were killed. The movement's leader, Mahatma Gandhi, was horrified. He felt the people weren't ready for disciplined nonviolence, so he did something shocking. He called off the entire campaign. It was a huge setback, and it sparked a lot of debate and argument within the movement itself. And this moment kind of reveals just how complex the freedom struggle was getting. In 1920, two very different organizations were formed, the Rashtriya Swamsevak Sangh, or RSS, and the Communist Party of India. This just goes to show you, there wasn't just one single vision for what a free India should look like. You had these competing ideologies popping up, one based on Hindu nationalism, the other on class struggle, and both were trying to gain influence. The fight, of course, continued, and it really picked up steam again in the 1930s. A whole new wave of protest, the civil disobedience movement, kicked off with Gandhi's famous Salt March. The pressure on the British was immense, and it actually led to a real shift in their policy. By 1935, they passed an act that granted limited self-governance in the provinces. Now, it wasn't independence, not by a long shot, but it was a pretty significant concession.
And that brings us to the final, absolutely climactic act, the final countdown. After decades of fighting, of partial victories and painful setbacks, the demand became absolute. No more negotiating for a little bit of autonomy. This was all or nothing. So in 1942, with Britain in the middle of World War II and seriously weakened, the Indian National Congress launched its final, most decisive campaign, the Quit India movement. The demand was boiled down to just two simple, powerful words: Quit India. It was an unmistakable, unambiguous call for the British to leave, now. The war ended. The British Empire was exhausted. The pressure from India was just relentless. And finally, the moment came. On August 15th, 1947, after 62 long years of struggle, India finally achieved its independence. I mean, can you imagine? The culmination of millions of dreams, of generations of sacrifice? It had finally happened. A new nation was born.
So the struggle for independence was over, but in many ways, a new and maybe even harder struggle was just beginning. Because winning your freedom is one thing, but what does it truly mean to build a nation from the ground up? That's a question India, and really the whole world, is still figuring out today.